10 Creepiest Places People Have Been. According to Reddit. Number 10. I was on a family vacation to Atlanta, about 1972. We went to visit some cousins of my grandmother's, twin sisters. Never married, in their 80s. The house was in a rundown neighborhood. From the street, you'd think it was abandoned. Inside, it was all antiques, however. The furniture from the 30s and the 40s, slowly deteriorating, looked as though they hadn't dusted in years. The wallpaper was peeling, old portraits were hanging half fallen. Looking up to the second floor from the stairs, it was just cobwebs and collapsed ceilings. They said they hadn't been up there in years. We definitely heard rat noises. They both looked and lived like ghosts, and seemed half mad, very civil and proper, but off. As an 8-year-old, I was terrified, especially when one of them joked and said, "You should leave him here, he can live with us." I burst into tears, and we left. Number 9. Forest Haven. Forest Haven is an abandoned insane asylum in Maryland. It's posted no trespassing and is technically patrolled by guards, but in reality it is very easy to get into. I went there 2 weeks ago with my significant other, exploring and taking photos, and there were 22 buildings on the property, all just wide open and abandoned, covered in collapsed ceiling tiles, broken glass, graffiti. There's still furniture in some of the rooms, and if you delve deep enough into the property, you can still find patient records that were left behind when they closed. We actually found a stack of patient files in a dark, windowless room. It was so surreal, reading about a severely mentally retarded man with a history of schizophrenia who talks incessantly. This patient had a 1-page handwritten summary for every year that he had been in the hospital, and they all started the same. Kenny is an almost 45-year-old white man with severe mental retardation and a history of schizophrenia. He has been at Forest Haven for 5 years, only the age and duration change from page to page. The first one is dated 1973, and the last page in the file is printed a memorial flyer showing that he died in September of 1990. The facility was ordered to close in 1974, but it didn't actually close its doors until 1991. In its last year of operation, there were 9 deaths at the asylum. Kenny was one of them. The creepiest part? The patient whose file I randomly opened up to, in the middle of the stack of wet, moldering files sitting on the corner of a collapsing desk in an interior room of an abandoned basement. It's not a run-on sentence at all. He shared the same first and middle name as my significant other. Just a weird, creepy coincidence. In a cold, wet, creepy place. In a world so seriously BetterHelp. Number 8. One year I worked in a haunted house that was inside a building that used to be a funeral home. The morgue was downstairs and still had the drawers. My job was to lay in the drawer and pop out when people walked by. Laying in a cramped drawer in the dark on cold metal when flashes of light and screams in the distance were probably the creepiest parts. I scared so many people, including a middle school age kid who straight up pooped, and a drunk college chick who peed. So, kind of worth it. Number 7. I found an old abandoned farmhouse a little ways outside of my town. It looked as if people who had lived there had just up and left one day. There were still dishes in the sink and a coffee cup with a newspaper beside it on the kitchen table. The date was in 2011. All their clothes were still hanging in the closet. State Fair ribbons were stuck all over one of the walls, one dating back to 1912. Had it not been for the thick layer of dust covering everything, animal droppings and their little footprints in the dust, you'd think someone still lived here. But no. To make it creepier, I explored the house at 3 a.m. The silence of that place felt so heavy, and it made me very uncomfortable being there. I later asked someone about the house, and it apparently belonged to an old couple whose children put them in a nursing home and just abandoned the house. Number 6. I had a friend who cleaned out and sold foreclosed homes for a living. He once took me on a ride to a house that he had to photograph for the bank after it had gone into foreclosure. From the moment we got there, it was unsettling. It was in an area of a ski resort and the neighborhood was wealthy, but once we stepped inside, it was clear that it had been used as some sort of boarding house for the resort staff. Numbers outside of each of the bedroom doors, large closets, weird spaces turned into bedrooms. The place was filthy, with black garbage bags everywhere, pizza boxes, booze bottles, like clearly a party house for the staff, but recently abandoned. At one point, I was on the ground floor and my friend was in the basement when I suddenly got full body chills. Number 15. I was standing in the kitchen, and there was a bathroom next to it with the door closed. And I somehow knew there was someone hiding in that bathroom. At the very same instant, my friend called me down into the basement where he had found a back corner which had been converted into another sleeping area. There was a television still on, just showing static, and a kitchen knife on the crate next to the mattress. That was the moment I stepped directly behind my 6'4", 300-pound friend and told him we needed to GTFO. I'm pretty sure the house was being used as an illegal boarding house for under or undocumented resort workers, and I honestly felt bad for the terrified kid who was still squatting in the basement, but I sure as hell didn't want to find him. Number 5. My own attic when I was 8 years old. Shut the lights off on your way out and sprint down the steps like the ceiling is collapsing behind you. Whoever says childhood is fun and beautiful, you're wrong. It's terrifying. Number 4. I explored the abandoned Six Flags in New Orleans. It was closed for Hurricane Katrina and never opened again. While my friends and I were there, we found everything essentially as it was left 4 years prior. Computers in the administration office, tickets in the admission booth, even jars of pickles in the concession stands. Ooh, so spooky. Number 3. Back during Vietnam, my unit got hit hard in the jungle. We split, and one group went to help find the VC who attacked us. We stayed behind to evacuate the wounded. The 4 able-bodied were supposed to hop on with the injured and go. We load up one, and the chopper doesn't make it back, so we 4 can't load. We would be grossly overweight. It's late. The sun is low, and the pilot says he'll drop these guys off and come right back for us. So we divvy up the ammo from the wounded and squat in an open field. 20 minutes go by. Then an hour. 2 hours. It's now pitch black, and we're seated in a grassy field. We spend the whole night looking at every stick and leaf as it twitched. You could feel the tension. We sat in a star, back to back, with our rifles pointed out. We knew we couldn't repel the attack, but we decided to take out as many as we could before being overrun, and if we were overrun, we'd pull out our grenades and do every Viet Cong for 25 feet in every direction. The tension was thick. And then sunrise came, and we heard the Huey come back. On the way back, he told us he had a hydraulics issue, and they worked all night to fix it so that we could get flown out as soon as possible. All 4 dust-offs had issues and took bullets, so that's why the other one didn't return the first time. The field of grass was extremely spooky, even if it was just in our minds. Number 2. An abandoned mental institution in New Jersey. My friend brought us there, and we wandered the grounds and went into a few buildings, including the morgue. The office still had patient files, and pediatric area still had kids' artwork. It had been abandoned for about 8 years at this point, and it was really creepy, and also really sad. Number 1 on the list of 10 creepiest places people have been reads as follows. I investigated a fatal fire in the middle of nowhere in the woods. This house was set so far into the woods that it took me forever to get back there on a dirt road. I pull up in front of the house, and of course the whole thing is boarded up, but the house is huge and old. I got creepy vibes just looking at the place. The front door was boarded up with a bit of wood. I didn't have any crowbars, so I had to climb up through a window, and in the back, the family had left a window open. As soon as I stepped foot into the house, I felt like everything was wrong, that I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't walk around, and I sure as hell shouldn't take pictures. It was that feeling like when someone is mad at you, and the slightest thing will set them off, so you just kind of sit there in silence hoping they'll forget you exist so you can do your own thing. But I was there to do a job, so I started to do my walkthrough and to take photos. This was clearly a set fire, and the guy who died had been murdered by his grandson, but I still had to document each area of origin thoroughly and do diagrams and all that because fatalities are a big deal. The entire time I was walking through the house, it feels like there's someone standing behind me, looking for me to slip up just once. Like when your boss is there. The one time that he's just staring at you, waiting on you to screw up so he can correct you. I finished the floor and I'm headed down into the basement where the guy died. It was mid-July and it was hotter than shit on asphalt. But as soon as I got to the basement, it was like someone turned on the AC. Of course, it was pitch black in the basement because A, it's a basement, and there's not much light down there on a normal day, and B, that's where the bulk of the fire was, so everything was pitch black. I walked through the basement into the bedroom. The fire hadn't reached the bedroom as it had been started at the stairwell, which acted as decent chimney to prevent the fire spread throughout the basement, but it did get hot enough in this room that the outline of the guy's body was in the carpet right next to his dog's body's outline. As soon as I entered that room, every single alarm bell in my mind was screaming. Get out, you moron, you jackass. Have you not seen a goddamn horror movie? Get out, this is where the angry ghost of Gramps murders you with a hatchet. But I had a job to do. So I stayed, I took my photos, collected my samples, I searched the whole basement for anything to give any idea why this would happen. I frequently had to leave the basement to go outside to give my brain time to stop freaking out. And every time I walked back into the house, everything in me was telling me to leave. The whole time I was in the basement, it was like someone was watching me, someone was standing in the corner just watching me. And of course, I was working by my tiny-ass flashlight that's basically useless, so it didn't really help. The last time I left the house, I crawled through the window and noticed that it had gotten cloudy and really windy while I was inside. Thinking it was a random Midwestern storm, I walked around the deck and looked out into the yard to find a buck just staring at me. I'd never seen a deer look angry, but it looked furious. I kind of just shrugged my shoulders and half waved, and it turned and walked away. As soon as it walked away, the wind died and it started to get warm again. Creepiest house I've ever been to, weirdest shit I've ever experienced. What a story. Thank you for listening. And a special thanks to my patrons, to my Twitch subs, and to my YouTube sponsors. You keep this channel afloat. Links are in the description. See you soon.